Do you ever wonder why your design studio drains the hell out of you? Or do you ever feel like all the efforts you put into the studio is not going to help you in the professional field? Well, if you do, you're not alone, because the architectural schools and the architectural academics have been so conventional and out of practice that most of the freshers feel irrelevant in the professional field. Architects nowadays have been feeling irrelevant and in crisis, creative, technical, and executional crisis. Architecture is not in crisis because of technology, and definitely not because of engineers, contractors, or artificial intelligence. Architecture is in crisis because the way architects are educated no longer aligns with how buildings are actually conceived, delivered, regulated, and maintained in the real world. This is not a cultural complaint. It is not nostalgia. It is not an attack on creativity. It is a structural mismatch between education and professional reality, and that mismatch is now severe enough to affect the global relevance of architects as a profession. Architecture schools today are still structured around a worldview that belongs to the late 20th century. A world where projects moved slowly, liability was simpler, digital coordination did not exist, and architecture was judged primarily as a visual and conceptual discipline. That world is gone. But the education system has not caught up. The profession has evolved into a complex, high-risk, data-driven, and multidisciplinary field. Education continues to pretend that design alone is sufficient preparation. It is not. For decades, architecture schools have told students a simple story. If you learn how to design well, if you develop strong concepts, if your drawings and presentations are convincing, you will succeed. That story was never fully true, but today it is actively misleading. Modern architectural practice is judged not by how compelling a design looks on a board, but by whether a project can be delivered efficiently, coordinated accurately, approved legally, constructed safely, and maintained economically. None of those outcomes are central priorities in most architectural curricula. The dominant structure of architectural education remains the design studio. Studios consume the majority of academic credits, teaching hours, and emotional investment. They are treated as the heart of architectural identity. Everything else is secondary. The studio model was developed for a very different professional environment. It emerged when architecture was largely an author-driven discipline, when regulation was lighter, when buildings were less technologically complex, and when the architect retained more unilateral control over the project. Today's construction environment is nothing like that. Projects involve hundreds of stakeholders, overlapping legal responsibilities, integrated digital models, performance simulation, procurement strategies, and risk management frameworks. Yet students spend years designing hypothetical buildings in isolated academic bubbles. Studio projects typically involve imaginary clients, fictional budgets, and loosely enforced constraints. There are no real contractors, no real schedules, no real procurement systems, no real insurance, no real liability, no real consequences. Students can ignore building codes, fire safety requirements, accessibility regulations, structural feasibility, and cost implications without penalty. In fact, they are often rewarded for doing so if the conceptual narrative is strong enough. This trains imagination, abstraction, and visual communication. It does not train accountability, responsibility, or professional judgment. The consequences of this approach are reinforced through jury-based evaluation systems. Design juries reward confidence, persuasion, and aesthetic clarity. They reward students who can speak fluently about ideas and defend formal decisions rhetorically. Technical reasoning, coordination logic, and feasibility are rarely the primary basis of evaluation. When they are considered, they are often treated as secondary constraints rather than central drivers. This conditions students to believe that explanation matters more than execution. That belief becomes dangerous when carried into professional practice, where execution is precisely what determines success or failure. The construction industry has already undergone a digital transformation. Building information modeling is not an emerging technology. It is a baseline requirement for serious projects. Cloud-based collaboration, federated models, clash detection, data-rich documentation, and lifecycle analysis are now standard expectations. Yet many architecture schools still treat digital construction tools as optional or peripheral. BIM is often taught as software training rather than as an integrated workflow. Parametric systems are taught as formal experimentation tools rather than coordination mechanisms. Data management is barely addressed at all. As a result, many graduates leave school knowing how to produce compelling visual output, but lacking the ability to manage information. They can model shapes but cannot coordinate structure, services, sequencing, or cost data. They know interfaces but not systems. In a global market, this is a fatal weakness. Firms hiring across borders do not have the luxury of retraining graduates for years. They need professionals who can integrate quickly into complex workflows and reduce risk from day one. When architecture graduates cannot meet those expectations, firms adapt. They outsource technical tasks. They automate documentation. They shift coordination authority to engineers or construction managers. They limit architectural involvement to early concept phases. This is one of the main reasons architectural authority is shrinking globally. Not because architects are incapable, but because education has not prepared them for the realities of contemporary practice. Architecture is also a legally regulated profession. Every drawing issued for construction is a legal document. Every decision carries liability. Errors can result in financial loss, legal disputes, or threats to public safety. Despite this, professional practice education is often treated as an afterthought. Contracts, procurement systems, liability structures, insurance, and regulatory compliance are compressed into a small number of lectures or electives. Graduates frequently enter practice without understanding how architects are paid, how risk is allocated, how disputes arise, or how professional responsibility is enforced. This knowledge gap is not harmless. It transfers risk from educational institutions to employers, clients, and the public. Firms respond logically. They limit responsibility assigned to junior architects. They reduce trust. They lower starting salaries. They retain decision-making authority at senior levels or transfer it to other disciplines. This dynamic weakens the profession internally and externally. Architecture becomes a service rather than a leadership role. Academic culture continues to promote the myth of the architect as a solitary creative genius. This myth is deeply embedded in studio culture, pedagogy, and professional identity. In reality, no building of significance is delivered by a single author. Buildings are complex systems assembled by multidisciplinary teams involving architects, engineers, consultants, contractors, regulators, and clients. Modern architectural leadership is not about individual expression. It is about coordination, negotiation, decision-making, and responsibility across disciplines. When architects are trained primarily as individual designers, they are poorly equipped to lead teams. When they cannot lead, leadership is taken over by others. This is not a conspiracy, it is a competence issue. Engineering-led and construction-led firms increasingly control project delivery because they are trained to manage complexity, risk, and execution. Architecture education has not kept pace with this shift. Architecture schools also normalize harmful working cultures. Excessive workloads, sleep deprivation, unpaid labor, and public humiliation are treated as traditions rather than systemic failures. Students are taught implicitly and explicitly that suffering is a prerequisite for excellence. This belief does not produce better architects. It produces burnout, anxiety, depression, and early exit from the profession. Numerous studies show high levels of mental health distress among architecture students and young professionals. This is not incidental. It is a predictable outcome of educational structures that reward overwork and emotional endurance rather than efficiency and clarity. The profession cannot sustain itself if it systematically drives out its own talent. The market does not reward suffering. It rewards reliability, competence, and results. Accreditation systems play a central role in maintaining outdated educational models. Most accreditation frameworks focus on credit hours, course distribution, and formal compliance rather than demonstrated professional competence. Universities design curricula to satisfy accreditation checklists, not market demands. If accreditation does not require proof of digital coordination skills, construction literacy, or delivery competence, universities have little incentive to teach them rigorously. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. Education lags behind practice. Accreditation protects education from change. The profession absorbs the cost. Markets respond predictably. When architects cannot deliver value efficiently, architectural work is reduced to conceptual or cosmetic roles. Documentation becomes automated or outsourced. Design authority migrates to integrated firms that combine architecture, engineering, construction, and technology. This is not an attack on architecture. It is market adaptation. If architecture education continues unchanged, the profession will continue to lose relevance, bargaining power, and leadership in shaping the built environment. Reform is not optional, it is inevitable. Architectural education must shift from time-based learning to competency-based evaluation. Degrees and licenses must be tied to demonstrable skills rather than hours spent in studios. Digital construction literacy must be mandatory. BIM coordination, data workflows, lifecycle analysis, and interdisciplinary collaboration must be core subjects assessed with real performance criteria. Industry-integrated education must become standard. Paid internships, real project exposure, and employer-verified assessments must be embedded into academic programs. Professional practice must carry equal weight to design. Contracts, procurement, cost control, scheduling, and legal responsibility must be treated as foundational knowledge. Faculty members must be required to maintain industry relevance through practice engagement or continuous professional development. Teaching architecture without current professional competence is no longer defensible. Well-being standards must be enforced. Overwork and burnout cannot continue to be normalized in education. Sustainable professional habits must be taught from the beginning. Professional authority must be linked to verified competence and function, not titles alone. Responsibility should follow ability. The goal of architectural education is not to eliminate creativity. It is to ground creativity in reality. Education must produce professionals who can design intelligently, coordinate accurately, manage responsibly, and lead effectively. Architecture is not becoming irrelevant. Poorly educated architects are. If education does not change, the market already has. Comment if you feel like your studio feels overwhelming and your lecturers are out of touch with the reality. I will be posting about the technical and digital skills that an undergrad architecture student should have by the time they get out of the architecture school, so keep in touch.